Our language is a reflection of ourselves. So the ways in which we speak, it's a reflection of us. And then he goes on and he kind of clarifies it even further. A language is an exact reflection of the character and growth. So it's a reflection of what? Well, in these two categories, he says, the character and growth. Hopefully you're speaking differently when you're 18 than you did when you were 8, in terms of your vocabulary. Hopefully you're more descriptive as well. Hopefully you'll be speaking differently when you're 28 versus when you're 18. Hopefully you'll be speaking even more at 38 than 48. In other words, the way in which you speak, it should reflect a lot of things. It should reflect your life experiences. It should reflect the things that you've learned. It should reflect, a change in character in certain ways, if you're more patient or less patient. And so it demonstrates the growth and the character as well. Not super complicated beyond that, but it is important because whether we like it or not, people do judge us by the words that we use. And if you want to find yourself upwardly mobile in society, one of the fastest ways to do it is to change the way in which you speak. To speak more clearly, to increase your vocabulary. I mentioned earlier Malcolm X. Does anybody know how Malcolm X expanded? How is it that he expanded his vocabulary? He went to jail, reading books, but he did more than just that. There was one specific book. He read the dictionary and he copied it out. So this is the dude who this is the guy who started at Aardvark, or AIM, whatever, and he went all the way to xylophone. And he copied everything out of the dictionary. Yeah? I remember reading that when I was in high school. I was like, really? So I started copying the dictionary. I got through A. And I was like, screw that, man, I'm not in prison. If I had more time, maybe, But you start thinking about it, think about all the words that you could add to your vocabulary. By doing that, there would essentially not be a word in the English language that's used today that you've never heard before. Nobody would ever be able to say a word to you that you didn't know what it meant. And Malcolm X was an interesting guy, too, because he was so incredibly precise with his language. I was listening to this interview one time. I guess it was an interview. But they were asking him, and of course they were cornering him in such a way. They were asking him about people who were assaulting police officers. And he said, the person interviewing him said something to the effect of, now you said before that you encourage people to assault police officers. And Malcolm X, he always had his hand by his ear for some reason. He said, no, I never said that. I said that I support people who do it. Well, what's the difference between encouraging and supporting? He said, well, I'm not telling people to do it, but when people do it, I understand why they do it, and I support it. But I'm not saying people should go out and do it, but if you do it, you have my support. It's a very fine distinction, but it's an important one, especially in terms of what he was talking about. So you'll find that when people can control the language, they can kind of corral you into saying things that you didn't actually mean, or kind of convince people that you said something that you didn't actually say. So even just in terms of that, it's important to be able to control your language so that you can control your own story, control your own narrative. When you guys came in here on the first day of class, if you remember, I asked you, why are we here? What are we doing here? Like, why are we studying language arts? What's the point? And we all times have these answers like, to graduate. Just need a credit to graduate. Fair enough. Or because we have to, because they put us in this class. Or we'll say things like, to have a better future. But how does it do that? What's the power of that? And all those are fine answers, by the way. And they're all probably true answers as well. But there's something that's more to it, which is that the more control that you have over your language, the more control you have over your thoughts, the more control you have over your narrative, over your story. I mean, have you ever found yourself in a position, I'm sure you've found yourself in positions before, where you're trying to explain how you feel, and you're like, I can't explain it. It's hard to explain. Or you'll say how no, I don't know what you mean. Oh, never mind, it's too complicated. No, it's just having practiced explaining it. And those are the growing pains. You have to go through a lot of those kinds of moments. But then there's something that's incredibly powerful there, by the way. Especially if you find yourself in a relationship. And I wonder how many of you have ever been in a relationship before where the person is, you just can't figure out how they're feeling. It doesn't have to be a romantic relationship. It can be between friends. It can be in your family. You're trying to figure out how someone feels about something. It's usually a guy, just kind of shrugs shoulders, or doesn't want to talk about it, or can't communicate with it. Imagine how much more fluid that conversation would go, or that relationship would go, actually, if the person was able to explain what they're thinking and feeling. And then think about how much deeper that relationship would form, because you'd know more about each other. Of course, then you'd know more about yourself as well, and the whole thing becomes a deeper cycle. It all has to do with the language that we use and the ways in which we use it as well. You know? The purpose of language is just to communicate ideas. So becoming better at that thing is never going to harm you at all. You know, if you go into a job interview and the person asks you, why should we hire you? Think about the kinds of things that we would oftentimes say. Yeah, because you're hiring, you need a job. You know? Or, you know, I'm a hard worker. Okay, that's nice. Are you a conscientious worker? That strikes people differently, because everyone says, I'm a hard worker, I learn fast. You know, I'm a conscientious worker. I'm curious about the operations of things, and so I'll learn the job more deeply because I'm going to be curious to see how things operate within it. Well, if you have those two answers from those two people, which one do you suppose, if you were the boss, you'd be more inclined to go towards? It's a very similar answer. One's just more detailed and more precise. And that's the thing that we gain from it, to become more precise with our language. And that will reflect your character. If you're a conscientious speaker, if you're a conscientious reader, you're probably a conscientious character, because you've taken the time to grow in those kinds of things. So, if you want to improve yourself, step one, improve your language. And once you improve that, a lot of things flow from there. You now have the language to think about certain issues that you wouldn't have the language to think about otherwise. You know? I mean, in a really silly example, not silly example, but you get the idea. You can't talk about biology until you have access to the vocabulary. Once you do that, then you can talk about it. And then once you can talk about it, then you can think about it. And then once you can think about it, then you can start to develop deeper ideas around it. Well, the same is going to be true about relationships. Once you've developed the vocabulary to explain your feelings, now you can talk about them, now you can share them, now you can grow with somebody else in these ways. And again, not just romantic, friendships, families, all kinds of different ways. You know, but first things first, you have to have the ability to do that, the technical ability. You know? Anybody in here play guitar? An instrument? Yeah. Sometimes you're going to hear something in your head and you just can't play it. You know, you've got to have the technical ability to play it. There's no use in hearing it if you can't play it. So, same is true with language. Questions? Comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques?